Welcome to The Grind with Chris, where raw conversations meet real growth with life-changing perspectives.
This is a part of the story where everything starts to completely fall apart, and I hurt pretty much everyone around me. So after I got back from rehab, I was going to get my 401, which was right around like $32,000. So after I cashed it out, it was $24,000. Then I also was going to get full unemployment benefits. So my plan was to just chill, do the whole summer, have fun, sit on my boat, and just relax. Because for 3 years, I had done nothing but run around, work all the time. I was burnt out. Well, at that time, I was going to smoke weed. Nobody was going to stop me. That's what I was going to do. And so I started getting it. And of course, at that time in North Dakota, it wasn't legal. So I was having to buy it off the street, which everybody knows is a lot of money. I'm from Colorado, where I can get it very cheaply. So I started to convince myself that I was going to make runs to Colorado, grab it, come back with it. It was way cheaper, and I could get a lot more. At this time, I wasn't able to live with my wife no more because she lived in the company housing, and I didn't work for the company no more. So I was having to live with my mom. So that's what I did. I started making the runs back and forth to Colorado. Started selling it. Started making some money off of it, enough to keep going. And slowly started to lead down the wrong path. I remember that one night, it was a few days before Christmas, maybe a week. Every warning sign was there. I just ignored it. And so one night before Christmas, it was probably a week before Christmas, I wanted to make a run because I was getting low. And I didn't want to run out, and I wanted to have it for the holidays. So I stood there, and that night, I had done some mushrooms. And I got myself to convince that I wanted to make a straight drive there and a straight drive back. So eventually, I talked myself into buying some meth. At that time, I hadn't done it for quite a few years since I left Denver. So it was right around like 3.5 years. And I knew somebody that I could get it from. So I went and talked to him, convinced myself to do it like an idiot, not remembering that I had done mushrooms that same day. So I did it all night. My sister-in-law from my big brother had a son, and he needed a ride back to Colorado. So at that moment, I pretty much committed to going to Colorado. I remember that morning I walked outside, and there was snow everywhere. And my mom tried to convince me to not go, but I didn't listen. So I took off. Well, I got to Belfouche, South Dakota, and I was getting ready to turn on the off-ramp that goes on to I-90, I believe. And I remember I started to slide as I was going on the off-ramp. And the hill that goes down onto the interstate is big. So it would have been very bad for me to go down that. It wouldn't have ended up good at all. And so I tried to overcorrect the spin. And I remember that I caught the curb right before I went off of that bridge. And I just remember it was a big hit. And again, I'm in my nice Cadillac STS, and I knew there was some damage. So I pulled over, I looked at it, and I should have stopped. I should have went home. I did not. So I continued to drive. So I started going. I ended up getting to Denver, Colorado, and I dropped him off. Or maybe it was Rifle. I dropped him off in Colorado. Let's just go with that. And then I went to Leadville, Colorado, where my guy that got me the weed was. And it was winter. It was snow everywhere. Well, I got there, And he tells me that it wasn't ready. And at that moment, I was very upset because my whole plan was to do the meth, drive all the way there, and drive all the way back as fast as I could. And so he tells me that it's not going to be ready probably till the next day. But I was high, and I didn't want to sit there and do it because he never really liked me doing it. And he probably knew because we were best friends at that time, but he didn't say anything because he had his own problems. So he wasn't going to try and stop me. And so I told him I was going to stay the night at a girl's house. And so I said I'll be back in the morning. And I wasn't going nowhere. I went, and there they have this big fenced area. And that's where there's so much snow that they bring the snow in and they pile it up. Well, of course, a machine and a truck have to be able to get in there, so there's quite a bit of room inside that fenced area. So I figured, hey, looks like a good spot. So I went in there, I parked, I turned off my lights, and I sat there all night doing meth. Addiction makes you think that the next decision you make is the smartest. And so I waited for him to wake up, and I went to his house. And that's when he told me it probably wasn't going to be ready till later in the day. At that moment, I freaked out. Not on him, quietly to myself, knowing that I was almost out. And now I don't know if I was going to be able to make it back as a straight shot. So I told him, all right, well, I'll be back. I'm going to run down here. And at that moment, I kept trying to get a hold of everybody I know that could get me some more. I ended up driving to Rifle, but on my way to Rifle, coming down Leadville, my car went off the road into this little ravine, I guess, on the side, and I could not get it out. Well, this older couple happened to drive by, and they were able to help me get it out. At that moment, I should have stopped. I should have not kept going, but I didn't. So I go, messaging people that I don't really ever talk to. Finally got a hold of someone who can get it for me that I barely know. And I went and got it. And I was good to go. So I went back up to Leadville. Had to been probably like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And he finally said it was ready. I picked up 1 pound of marijuana and 3 ounces of mushrooms. I put it in the back, and he tried to convince me. Do not leave. Don't go right now. Stay the night and then leave first thing in the morning. And of course, I was high. Wasn't myself. Wasn't thinking. So I said, no, I'm leaving. I'm going. Jumped in my car, and I drove probably 10 miles around the mountain and found this road that went up on the back of the mountain. And I went up there, I parked, and I got my fix to get ready to drive. So that way I could go. Did that. And at this time, I'm starting to hallucinate already. And I should have stopped. So I kept going. And I finally get to probably Cheyenne. Well, on the way, I broke my utensil, my pipe. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be able to get a glass pipe for the meth. And so I was like, okay, the next best thing is aluminum foil. And so I went to this gas station in Casper, and I started looking around for it, and I could not find the aluminum foil. And it was there. I'm sure it was there. I just didn't know what I was doing. I was way too high to be doing anything. I shouldn't have been driving. That's a fact. So I turn around to the store clerk, and I just flip out on them. Completely start yelling at them that they ain't got none of the right stuff in the store. This store sucks. You guys need to have better products. Just completely went off. Ended up, all right, well, it's not here. Drove. I ended up stopping, and I don't know the next town, but there was a gas station probably 30, 40 miles down the road. And I stopped at that one. Same exact thing. Started yelling at the clerk, trying to figure it out. And I would have loved to be able to see these cameras of what I was doing in that store, because I was an absolute idiot. I was looking like one of those guys who's completely strung out on drugs, being a complete idiot. But to me, I thought I had control. So finally, I find what I'm looking for. I go, I stop, get a little fix again, because by this time I'm getting extremely tired. I'm about 2.5, almost 3 days awake. Again, I forgot I did the mushrooms. So those had some kind of combination. I don't know if it was just because I was up doing them, but they were definitely not helping me. And I kept going. Well, on the way to North Dakota, if you want to take a shortcut, you cut through Sundance or Newcastle and you go up, and it brings you out to I-90, and that's when you drive back into Belle Fourche and you hit US 85. Well, I thought I turned on that turn. I did not. I must have drove past it and turned on a different road that I thought was that road. And at this time, my wife calls, and I start talking to her, and we start arguing because I'm telling her that I'm talking the Duck Dynasty. I have no idea where they came from or why I brought it up. I guess maybe because we were watching the show shortly before that, or, months before that. And I told her I was talking to Duck Dynasty, and they were showing me stuff, and I was going to pull over because we had some things to discuss. And she, of course, had no idea what was going on. She had no idea I was on the meth at that moment. She just thought I was sleep deprived. And so I continued to argue with her a little bit, and she's just trying to get me to go to sleep. The people closest to you suffer as well. And so she's trying to talk me in to stay and just pull over. I wasn't having it. And I, at this time, thought I was in New England, North Dakota, which is only 20, 30 minutes from where I lived. I was not. At this moment, I had no clue where I was. And I remember that I pulled up over this little mountain ridge, and to the left was this lit water tank, I guess you would call it. It looked like a water tank. But on top of it, it had like this light, or maybe it was like a cross. And I thought that it was like this U-shaped, like this, and then like this. And it was like a figure, like a stick figure kind of. And to me, it looked like it was burning. It was on fire right on top of this tank. Well, after I saw that, I started driving a little more, and it was the headlights of the cars. Every car that drove by, I thought had this figure and was burning, and their headlights were burning. So at this point, I'm starting to freak out. I have no idea where I'm at. My GPS is speaking Russian or some language. I could not understand it. I have no idea what it was doing. And so I pull up to this field where I saw this truck, and I start talking to these people, like, how do I get to the interstate? Where am I at? I had no clue. And I was pretty rude. And so I tried talking to him. But then when I looked around, it looked like there was dead bodies all around their truck. And at the time, it was just bushes and whatever's out in the field. And they were just doing what farmers do and working on their truck out there in the middle of nowhere, just doing what ranchers and cowboys and stuff do. And so I jump in the car and I speed off because I'm afraid that those are all dead bodies and I'm just completely hallucinating. So I finally pull over to the side of this road, and I have no idea how I'm getting anywhere I'm going. I should have just stopped. I should have slept, waited till the morning, and then went on my way. So I'm freaking out. And what do? I pick up the phone and I call the cops. And I got to remind you, I got a pound of pot in the trunk with 3 ounces of mushrooms. And I don't know why I thought that the cops weren't going to know that I was on something. So I called 911 and I started telling them that the highway's been closed. There's no roads to get out of here. I have no idea how to get home. I need them to come help me. Finally, probably 10 minutes later, cop pulls up behind me, comes up and asks me what I'm doing. I explained to him, hey, I have no idea where I'm going. I need to find a gas station because I'm running low on gas. I said the interstate is gone. It's been closed off. Right then, he should have arrested me. He didn't. And so we start driving. He says, follow me. And we start driving. And I'm sitting there driving. And I look over, and here comes the cop walking up to my window. And I'm like, okay. Well, how's he walking up when I'm driving? And he knocks on the window and rolls down, and he says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm following you. And he looks at me, and he says, you're going like 3 miles an hour. I'm like, oh. So I kind of straighten up and stuff. Well, at this time, he's like, well, hold on a minute, please. And he goes to the back of the car, and I see the 2 cops standing there at the back of the car. And I look in my rearview mirror, and I see one of them point down at the trunk. At that moment, I'm like, oh, crap. Well, he finally gets in the car, says, follow me, and takes me to the gas station. Well, on the way to the gas station, he's putting an APB out on my car. And so I went to the gas station, I got the gas, and I don't know how, but I ended up right back where I called the cops on myself. And at this time, it's 8 o'clock at night or so. I am completely hallucinating. All rightful thinking is out the window. Mentally, I was gone. So I end up over there and I start freaking out. I'm thinking people are chasing me. Again, I'm in my Cadillac STS. And I just go out to this field. I blow through the barbed wire fence like it was nothing, like I was in a truck. And I just start Dukes of Hazzarding all over this field. And I'm circles and donuts and just running because I think people are coming to kill me. And so finally I end up down, stuck. And at the moment, I didn't know where I was. And so I was stuck and I was trying to get out of the car or out of the rut. And I remember I opened the door and I'm looking out in the field. Well, the guy that I had met in Leadville and my son, I swore they were in the field. And this is dead of winter, cold, and there's snow. And I'm yelling at them to get back in the car so that way they don't freeze. And I'm laughing and just having a conversation with absolutely nothing. Well, I try getting out and I run myself out of gas again. So at this moment, I am talking to people and I'm like, oh, they'll be back for the gas. I even had it in my mind that people actually came and brought me gas and put it in the car. And then I woke up. So I must have just faded. I faded out and I woke up and I was still in the car. Well, I hadn't been running the car all night because I was out of fuel. So when I woke up, my feet were completely frozen. They were so cold. I'm surprised I didn't get frostbite. So I look around. I try to start the car. I can't do that. Instead of pushing OnStar, which I should have done, I started to figure out, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to go and find someone to pull me out. At this moment, I ain't out of the car yet, so I have no idea where the car is at or what I'm in. So I start picking up the stuff in my car, and I find pieces of the broken pipe that I had. I start setting it on the middle console, just putting all the evidence in a nice little circle for the cops so they have a nice little bow that shows them what's going on. And I had my windows down, and I get out of the car, and I'm stuck in a storm drain out in the middle of a field down this hill. And I looked at it. I have no idea how I'm getting out. Not without a tow truck. But I figured I could. I'm still a little intoxicated. I hadn't done nothing, but I'm still a little intoxicated. So I go and I used to carry my weed pipe in a case. And so I grab it. I hit it. I put it back in the weed case. I grab the bag that's in my trunk. and I start walking along the road. People drove by me, ignored me. Somebody must have called the cops at that time, because eventually they told me that there was reports that I was walking down the road with a red bag, which was the bag that I had. But I finally stopped this truck that kind of looked like a Leeds truck for ConocoPhillips. It was white and had the little rack on the back. You probably don't know what I'm talking about if you didn't work in the oil field. And I stop him. He stops. We start talking. I say, hey, man, can you come give me a jump, help me out of this rut? He says, yeah, I'll come help you. And I said, all right. And so we finally go, and it took me a minute to find back where my car was, because it was way down in the storm drain. And I look at him, and he looks at me, and he says, oh, we're going to have to go get the farmer. And you could tell on his face he was concerned. So he said, we got to go get the farmer, see if I can come onto this property. At that moment, he was not going to help me. So we go to the farmer. He gets the farmer. The farmer comes out, and he's like, well, let's take a drive. Let's see the damage that you caused. And thank God, the part of the fence that I blew through was the part that they actually open up to let the cattle in and out. So all I did was damage 3-4 little wires, but it damaged my car. I ended up having $22,000 worth of damage to the car. So he starts talking to me, and he says, well, I've been having people out on my property. They're living out there. I just want to make sure that it's not you. He said, so we're going to call the cops. I'm like, all right. But when I got into his truck, I took my red bag and I stuck it behind his seat. And I don't think he noticed, but that's what I did with it. And that's when he said he's calling the cops. I'm like, okay. And remind you, I hadn't drove all night. And so I was walking around trying to find these people to help me. And so the cops show up. Of course, they give me a breathalyzer. I pass that. Then they give me the sobriety test. I didn't pass. No way I could have. Rock bottom is a chain of big decisions that gone bad. And this is what will lead me to change. So the cops decide to arrest me for a DUI. And of course, they're going to go and look at the car. And like I said, I took all the evidence and wrapped it in a nice little bow and set it right in the open for him. And that's when I was like, okay. Well, when he opened the weed pipe, smoke that was still in there from when I took the hit popped out. And he found the evidence right away because the windows were open, so he could look in the car and automatically had probable cause. And so he ended up saying, all right, we're arresting you for a DUI. And at first, I'm like, how? How are you arresting me for a DUI when I wasn't even driving? I was walking along the road. My keys were in my pocket. So I was very upset. Like, that makes no sense. They end up taking me to the police station. I'm sitting in there. I finally call my wife, let her know what's going on. And that's when detectives come in. And they sit me down. And at this time, I thought the mushrooms were manslaughter. So I'm worried about the mushrooms. I don't care about the pound of pot. And so they come in and I start talking about the mushrooms. And they're like, oh, that's just a misdemeanor, which I was relieved. But the pound of pot was a felony. So again, I was shocked. Out of all that stuff I had, they didn't care. All they wanted to know was about the little piece of meth that I still had left. Oh, well, where did you get this from? And at first I was like, well, if it's the pot, you're going to have to arrest the whole state of Colorado. And they said, no, we want to know about the meth in there. And I said, I ain't telling you where I got that from. It's not even enough. Charge me with it. I'm not even worried about it. So they left, and I sat in there. Eventually, my little brother comes and bonds me out because I had the money. I end up going down, doing court, and they end up throwing me in jail for 30 days. My first time ever sitting behind bars for longer than a few hours. Arrest me for 30 days, and they let me go. Well, at that time, I'm starting to contemplate, okay, well, where am I going? What am I going to do? And I'd always heard that North Dakota probation was rough. Probation was hard. And so I didn't want to do that. So I convinced myself to move to Minneapolis, where I knew absolutely nobody. And so I moved to Minneapolis. I start to work a job at Cormark. But at the time, I'd had a real problem with carpal tunnel many, many years. Well, in North Dakota, they would just shoot me full of cortisone and call it good, and that's what they would do. Well, at Cormark, it started to aggravate the carpal tunnel. So I went to the doctor to get cortisone, and he wouldn't give it to me. He said, "Oh, you're young enough. Let's do the surgery, and then that way it's done and over with." And I was like, "Oh, do I have to?" And he's like, "Well, I'm not giving you a cortisone shot." And I was like, "All right." Well, come to find out, they have to do it a certain time apart, and they won't do both hands. So I'm going to be limited on my left hand, and I'm going to be limited on my right hand for, I think it was 45 days. So I go in to talk to Cormark, and I ask them, can I go on night duty? And I explain everything that happens. They don't agree to it. They let me go right at that moment. I was very furious. Like, this can't be right. And so I eventually went and talked to a lawyer, which he said that I could definitely have a lawsuit. That ended up playing out, but then I just decided not to go through with it. I probably could have been awarded money, but he wanted me to fly back and forth to Minneapolis, and I just didn't want to spend that money. I didn't have the money at the time. And so things started to go downhill. And what's the first thing I do? I turn to drugs. So I start going on Craigslist, which was a thing back then, and I start messaging people trying to find where to find weed because I don't know nobody in town. And so I meet this guy, and he starts being my guy for a little while. And so, I'm off smoking weed, which I shouldn't be because I'm on probation. And I ended up going for a little bit. And then it started to get to where I couldn't pay for the place that I was living at, which was in Minneapolis. And so I started looking on Craigslist for someone that wanted a roommate. And I found this lady. Well, in that time, before I move, I meet this other guy that starts being my weed dealer. And we hit it off right away. Right? It was like we were best friends from the moment we started messaging each other. And so I started hanging out with him, but I had to move. So I eventually moved to this lady's house and rent out a room. And at this time, I don't have no money. I'm on food stamps. The state's giving me some money, and then the rest of it I have to get my wife to pay for. And I should have just went home. I should have just stopped and decided to leave. I didn't. So I ended up living with this lady, and this guy kept coming over, and all of a sudden one day is in a Pontiac Grand Am, or a week later, he pulls up in his BMW. And me, I'm broke, got one wrist that's bandaged up, I can't do much with it. I got jealous. I wanted to know how he was making that money and how I could be a part of it. My past caught up with me again. I kept chasing shortcuts instead of fixing myself. So what's weird is right before that, the lady that I was living with, out of nowhere, and I didn't know that the other guy that I was getting the weed from was into anything else. I mean, it was obvious, but I never asked him. And out of nowhere, this lady says, "Well, I could smoke meth if I could ever find it." Just out of nowhere. I have no idea where it came from. We weren't talking about anything like that, just out of nowhere. And to me, I feel it was a part of destiny. It was everything happened the way it happened because I needed it to happen that way. And so after she said that, a few days passed by, and he comes over and we go out and hang out, and out of nowhere, he tells me that he's dealing meth. And so right away, I'm like, all right. So I let the lady I'm living with let her know. And for a while, I was like, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing it. And then finally, the addiction part of me kicked in. And so we went, and the first night we started to do it, we had to drive out to the casino. And I remember we got it and we went and started to leave. And I broke the key off in her ignition. And we're an hour away from the house. And we sat there and started freaking out. Well, come to find out, you could still start the truck without the key. So that's what saved us. So we started doing it. And that's when everything started to roll downhill very quickly. Of course, I got addicted. And so we kept doing it. Finally, I talked to him and I'm like, what are you doing? Let me have some. Hook me up with some people. I'm tired of struggling. I'm tired of my wife paying my stuff. I convinced myself to go back to dealing. So I start getting pretty deep into it. I start posting stuff on Craigslist like a complete idiot and saying all these things and just trying to find customers the best way that I knew how, and I didn't know nobody, so that's all I could do. I started meeting these people, started hanging out at this prostitute's house with a bunch of other ones, and it was just bad. And so I started hanging out here. We started doing it together, and she had tried to sleep with me a few times, but she just was trashy. It was never going to happen. And I was just putting myself in bad positions that I don't know how I was going to get out of them. And then I started hanging out with this other guy that one of the dudes introduced me to. And this guy he was a junkie. He was into slamming it. And we started hanging out quite a bit. And next thing you know, I was hanging out at his house. I was watching him do it. And it was getting to the point where I was like, that ain't so bad. In my entire life, I've stayed away from the needle. Never been my thing. It actually disgusts me quite a bit. So I was pretty messed up to start thinking about it. And so I go back. Well, the guy that I was getting this from, I could get a hold of him every single day. But there's this one particular day that I could not get a hold of him. And I couldn't get a hold of him all the way from the night, all the way to the next day till about 11 in the morning. And I thought it was weird. And I didn't think nothing about it because I'd been up. And this guy and me had hung out. We had done everything together. We were doing these drugs together. We were very involved in just more than meth. We were doing Molly and ecstasy and pills, smoking weed. We did it all together. Well, he kept trying to get me to meet up with this guy named Adam. I was like, okay, but he was outside of town. And so I kept trying to find a way. Well, this other guy that I met, we got in an argument because he kept promising me he'd give me a ride and he didn't. And so I got mad at him and I said, do not call me and talk to me again. Like, I'm tired of you playing games. And we quit talking. Well, after that, he calls me like 3-4 days later. And by this time, I'm on my 11th day of being awake. And there's a few times where I nodded off, but I woke up within a few minutes or 10, 15 minutes because I was constantly on the light rail. So I would fall asleep, but I just kept doing more and more to try to keep myself up. And he finally calls me, apologizes, and says he's got a ride. And so I go and I meet the guy who's giving it to me, and I say, hey, give me this. And out of nowhere, he starts loading me up with more than he normally does. And he says, okay, well, give me the cash you have. I gave him what I had, but I kept some. And I said, all right. So I called this Adam, and I said, I'm on my way. I didn't call him, I texted him. And the whole time, the signs were there that this dude was a cop. Like, he had started talking to me. He started talking about he was on probation, and he asked me who my probation officer was. Well, like an idiot, I told him. Well, he and my probation officer were talking to each other, and so my probation officer knew I was going to get arrested before I even knew. And so I told him, well, I'm going to meet you at this Nike store outlet in a city in Minnesota. I can't remember the name at the moment. And so I headed out there and texted him that I was on my way. And he said, well, I'm not ready. And I said, well, I'm coming ready or not, because this is the only ride I'm going to have. And the guy I'm riding with happens to know some people on the way and says we can offload a little bit there. I am forever thankful that that happened, because it dropped me under enough to where I didn't get a class 2 felony. And so I went and I met these people. We sat there for a little while, and then we went on our way. And on our way, Adam texts me and says, well, we're not going to meet at this Nike outlet store. Let's meet at this Casey's gas station. I said, all right. So we pull up to this Casey's gas station, and I'm looking at the guy that was driving, and I said, okay, well, while we're here, get some fuel. I'm going to go in, get us some drinks. And I turn and I look to the back of the van. And when I look to the back of the van, there's 3 cars up on me. And one dude comes out of it, looks nothing like a cop. This dude looked like a biker for Hell's Angels, completely tatted up, beard. I would never have known he was a cop except the badge around his neck. And they tell me freeze. At that moment, I look at the field that's to my right. I look back at the cops. I look at the field again, and I decide I'm going to run. I'm going to book it. But then, in my mind, I start thinking, okay, well, you've been up 11 days. You're not going to get far. They're going to arrest you. So I decide to drop to my knees and put my hands on my head. And at this time, my bag is sitting in the back seat of this van, fully loaded with everything enough to put me in prison for a lot of years. And so they come up, they ask me for guns. They arrest the dude that's with me, and I say, he has nothing to do with it. He has nothing to do with it. He just gave me a ride. He has no idea what I'm involved in. Well, I hear them talking about we were at this house previously. So they knew we were at this other house. So they were telling us the whole time, from the time we left to the time we got to this town. And so they were going to go back to that house and I guess raid it, I don't know. I heard them talking about it. At this moment, I knew I was screwed. So they eventually arrest me. They call me in. Well, I tell them that he has nothing to do with it. Well, come to find out, in the van, they have a substance pill. And he borrowed the van. It wasn't even his van, but there's a pill of substance in there. Well, come to find out, he's got warrants, and they're going to charge him with that pill. So he ends up going to jail with me. Well, while we're in there, they start questioning me, wanting to know things, and, and I'm just stunned at what's going on. And I'm absolutely furious because the guy that was giving me the stuff is the one who set me up with this guy. And I'd asked him numerous times, do you know this guy? And he's like, yeah, I know him. So I go in, I get booked in, and the judge says, you're going to get 84 months. So he gives me 84 months, and at 84 months, I was like, absolutely not. I am not taking it. They wanted to hit me with the 2nd-degree sales, class 2 felony. And I said, I'm not giving you sales, which they could have got me for it if I would have went any farther, because I was texting them. They have text messages. I mean, it was going to happen. And I said, I'm not taking that. I'll take a possession with intent to sell. And he says, all right. And so eventually I keep pleading down, and I was going to take it to trial. Finally, they come back and they said, we'll give you 24 months. And at that moment, I said, I'll take it. When they told me 84 months, at that moment, I decided that I wasn't going to live. Like, I had plans to jump off the side of the mezzanine and kill myself, because my whole family would be 7 years older. My wife, my son, I don't know if I could have lived with that. I was very serious about it. And of course, I went in, I dropped to my knees, I cried my eyes out, and I prayed to God. The thing that I'd always done, act like he's a slot machine, and that he was going to bail me out. Well, I got 24 months, enough time to sit down, rethink my life, and go down the right path. That's what I did. And of course, I was mad. I had plans when I got out to go and hurt the guy that was giving it to me. But as I got in there and I sat longer and longer, I forgave him because I needed that to happen. Prison was the worst thing to happen to me, but at the same time, it was the best thing to ever happen. I'm glad it happened. I wouldn't take anything back. I wouldn't go anywhere else. This is the story that I had to tell so that you could see in a 2-year time frame, which finding out that angel dust actually can stick with you for a year. So my thinking was never right. And there had been times where I'd smoke and the angel dust, I would feel like I was on it again. So it was still in my system. But it was a 2-year period that was the worst time in my life. But it also saved me. I just lost a sense of reality. And I needed to sit in the penalty box to get my mind right. I didn't let prison ruin my life. I let it save me. And for that, I'm forever thankful. Episode 5, I want to talk about the lack of accountability. Because until I went to prison and learned to become accountable, I never changed. I never tried to do anything different. And so once I became accountable for my own actions, I started to see the lives that I affected, and I started to make the turn to change better than ever. I was my own worst enemy, but then I became my greatest asset.